Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to begin in the 12th verse of the 3rd chapter of Ecclesiastes. And the book of Ecclesiastes are a series of observations of nature and human interaction compiled by Solomon, who was the king of the United Monarchy of Israel. And they may be thought of as puzzle pieces towards the same collective puzzle. It's one man's quest to find the meaning and purpose of life. And so far in the first chapter, it explains his dilemma. He reduces everything that seems significant to an equality of nothingness and meaninglessness. He expounds on the futility of wisdom at the close of the first chapter. The second chapter opens with him expounding on the futility of pleasure and wealth accumulated. And really the third chapter, he notes the cycles, the cyclical patterns in nature, and the idea being that they're appointments, not accidents. Ergo, we must align ourselves with the hands of providence, which orchestrates them in order to make the most of the passing show that is life. And so the 12th verse reads, "I know that there is no good for them but to rejoice and to do good in their lives, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is a gift of Elohim." So there's nothing wrong or sinful in having pleasure with the fruits of your labor. The danger and the problem becomes when you value the gifts more than the giver. So we are to receive our gifts in mindfulness of the giver, who is Elohim, who is the creator and controller of all. "I know that whatever Elohim does is forever. There is no adding to it, and there is no taking from it. Elohim does it, that men should fear before him." As an infinite being, there is no adding or subtracting. He is infinite. That means without limitation or end. So everything he does lasts forever. He is an eternal being, and his eternal essence is connected to him in the universe. His eternal energy, which he graciously bestows upon us so that we may enjoy, inherit eternal life. And he does all this so that men should fear him. So that's cause. There's nothing wrong with fearing the one who can injure you eternally. "Whatever is has already been, and what shall be has been before, but Elohim seeks out what has been pursued." So he's saying there's nothing new under the sun. Everything that can be seen and experienced and beheld has already happened before. Nature operates in cyclical patterns of repetitive phenomenon, and he documents this throughout the first and earlier in the third chapter. "Then again I saw under the sun, in the place of justice, wickedness was there, and in the place of righteousness, wickedness was there." So under the sun, it is the devil's domain. So the world we live in is more defined by evil. So even where justice is and righteousness should be, wickedness is there. So every person is ineradicably evil, and universal depravity is a doctrine we affirm. "I said in my heart, Elohim judges the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work." So every situation which we confront in our daily life all adds up to the final judgment to which we have to answer for the life we lived. And there's no escaping it, inasmuch as there's no escaping death. Hebrews 9:27, man shall appointed to die once, and after that the judgment. "I said in my heart, concerning the matter of the sons of men, Elohim examines them, to see if they indeed are beasts." So Elohim is a discerner of the hearts. The man judges the outward appearance. He looks in the heart. He judges the character, and that's how he evaluates and assesses us. And we do have the culpability or the negative potential to degenerate into beast-like creatures governed by our carnal appetites, violent, volatile, and there is war is an activity that's suited only for beast, yet practiced none so prolifically as the beast of man. "For the event of the sons of men is also the event of beast. One event befalls them. As one dies, so dies the other. Indeed, they all have one breath. Man has no advantage over beast, for all is futile." This is a common pattern. He's suggesting that to be wise and wealthy is meaningless, because at the end, the great equalizer, death comes to us all equally, and it makes us all equal as it comes. So even being endowed as the superior species, he's deflating its significance, because we're all mortal and we all perish, much like the beast in the so-called inferior species. All are going to one place, all came from the dust, and all return to dust. So that one place is the afterlife, and we all, as our body decays into the dust, and if we are lucky enough to be granted the resurrection, we will have resurrected bodies in perfect forms. Who knows the spirit of the sons of men, which goes upward, and the spirit of the beast, which goes down to the earth? So I saw that man could do no more better, but to rejoice in his own works, for that is his portion. For who would bring him to see what shall be after him? So he's equating mankind, humanity, the most exalted in evolutions would argue, the most evolved species, the dominant species on the planet, is essentially no better off, eternally speaking, than any beast or inferior animal. And so he's saying there's nothing sinful to take pleasure in the fruits of one labor, but to be mindful that of the giver as well as the gift, and be grateful there too. So the fourth chapter opens, "Then I looked again at all the oppression that is done under the sun, and see the tears of the oppressed, but they have no comforter, and power on the side of their oppressors, but they have no comforter." So Solomon administered justice with equity, and he was a fair ruler, but the absolute structure of the system of governance prevented him from being privy to every judgment case that was tried under his government. And the fact is that there were unscrupulous men. Now it's human nature for the wealthy to exploit the advantages that wealth entails at the expense of the poor, and this was a common dilemma in Israelite and every civilization. So Solomon is mindful that those who are losing everything not only are losing everything, but they have no one to comfort them. "Therefore I commended the dead who are already dead, more than the living who are already alive." So he's arguing the dead are already dead, and they have more cause to rejoice than this life we cherish and orient our every waking hour to surviving and improving. But he's longing, we get the sense that he's longing for the sweet release of death. He's had everything in life, and he's sick of it and doesn't want any more of it. "And better than both is he who has never existed, who has not seen the evil work that is under the sun." So all-encompassing is the evil that he observes in the universe that surrounds him, that he suggests that life itself is not worth it, just to behold all the evil and suffering and struggle in the world. So that's a pretty tall statement, and these are not very healthy thoughts, but they are legitimate and they are honest, and he's just expressing what he's feeling at the moment. "And I saw that all the toil and skill of the work bring envy between man and his neighbor. That too is futile, and feeding on wind." So envy, it's been said, is the origin of all evil, and it goes when now a child will be content to receive a blessing, but an adult receiving something is able to compare it to his neighbors, and the car that he drives, his neighbor drives a fancier one, and so it's an endless cycle of envy, which prompts upward mobility, incidentally. But it's reduced to the same level of futility and meaningless and vanity. "The fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. Better is a hand filled with rest than both hands filled with toil and feeding on wind." So Solomon never ever has kind words for idlers or lazy people. In the book of Proverbs, he connects poverty to indolence and idleness, and so the consuming of his own flesh, that means that they will perish by the very carnal flesh that they exalt. And better is a hand filled with rest. That means rest is tranquility, cessation of commotion and hostility, than both hands filled with toil and feeding on wind. So, what's the sense in being busy when you aren't able to rest and enjoy it? Then I looked again at vanity under the sun. There is one without a second who has neither son nor brother, and there is no end to all his labors. His eye also is not satisfied with riches. And for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of good? That too is futility and an evil task. So this is from the outside looking in, the foolishness of working like a beaver for when you don't have children and you're not able to take the time off to enjoy it. Now, life consists of a balance. We have to work in order to appreciate the indulgences and luxuries which we may abide in. But if we are so oriented towards work, then it kind of defeats the purpose of working in the first place, which was to lay hold and enjoy and access the experiences we couldn't attain in the absence of our toil. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. That's a self-evident axiomatic arithmetic statement. Two are better than one. Now, in any task, it always helps to have not only manpower, but brain power, additional, and we are communal creatures. We are geared towards relationship. So two are better than one, and theoretically, your burdens can be the load that you are carrying can be lightened in half with a faithful companion. For if they fall, one lifts his companion up. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. So just being in their immediate proximity, they have the advantage of helping a brother who had physically fallen, whereas he who travels alone and the solitary creature is bereft of that help when needed, should such a hypothetical emerge on him. Also, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But how does one keep warm? There's no body friction we can maintain off ourselves. We can multiply the warmth we feel through body heat and contact. Although one might be overpowered, two withstand him, and a threefold cord is not readily broken. So from two, he advances to three, and three cords are a lot more durable and sustainable and a force to be reckoned with than one flimsy cord. And one, it's a lot more difficult and challenging to overpower two as opposed to one. One is less likely to resist the force of your. Although one might be overpowered. A poor and wise youth is better than an old and foolish king who no longer knows how to take warning. So this is a real possibility for himself. He was an old king, and the reliance upon advice doesn't diminish as with the progression of age. The ruler has to constantly attend to it, and that requires advice in order to give him the best information to act on his recommended course of action. And but it's better to be young and poor than to be in a position of such responsibility and neglect the resources which you should utilize that are at your disposal and you are duty bound to, because the buck stops at the ruler. For he comes out of prison to be king, although in his reign he was born poor. I have seen all the living who walk under the sun. They were with the second youth, who stands in his place. So the majority of the inhabitants of the world are more readily identified with the second youth than the other character. There was no end of all the people, all who came before them. But the ones who come afterward do not rejoice in him, for that too is futile, and feeding on wind. So the generation upon generation, as they add and accumulate, the ones who come after them eventually neglect or fail to pay tribute to their ancestors who begot them, without whom they couldn't exist. And that's a tragedy of history, is that we don't reverence our ancestors to an appropriate extent. But he's essentially once more reiterating that it's all a species of vanity and an exercise in futility, and that is a common theme which repeats throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. And we're going to pick up on this some next time. Thank you so much. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.